The handwriting was mine. That was the first thing that scared me. The second was the date, October 14th, 2006. I was 8 years old. I was standing in my grandmother's empty house, holding an envelope that had somehow survived 20 years inside an old wooden sewing box. My name was written across the front in crooked blue ink, and underneath it were 3 words that made my stomach tighten: "For when you're ready." I almost put it back. Then I noticed who the letter was addressed to: Dad. My father had disappeared from my life when I was 8. For 20 years, I had believed he left because he didn't want us anymore. That was the story my mother told me, but when I unfolded the paper and read the first sentence, my hands began to shake. "Dear Dad, please don't leave because of what I told them." I read it twice. Then a third time, because there was something in those words that made no sense. I had never told my father anything. At least, that was what I remembered. And suddenly, standing alone in my grandmother's quiet house, I realized something far worse than the possibility that my mother had lied to me. Someone had spent 20 years making sure I never remembered what happened that night. My grandmother had died 6 weeks earlier, and the house had become my responsibility. It was strange being there without her. Every room still looked like she might walk in at any moment and complain that I was throwing things away too quickly. The curtains were still the same pale yellow ones. Her old clock still ticked above the fireplace. Even the kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon, because there was an unopened jar of it sitting in the cupboard. I had gone there that afternoon to sort through her belongings before the house was sold. I wasn't looking for anything connected to my father. I wasn't looking for answers. I was simply trying to finish a painful job. The sewing box was the last thing I planned to touch. My grandmother had used it for as long as I could remember. It was a small wooden box with a brass latch, scratched at the corners from years of use. When I lifted it from the bottom shelf, something slid behind it and fell to the floor. An envelope. My name was on it. I recognized the handwriting immediately because it looked like the handwriting in old-school notebooks my mother had kept. My handwriting, 8-year-old me. The envelope was yellow with age, but the words were still clear. "For when you're ready." I opened it expecting a childish drawing, or maybe a birthday note. Instead, I found a single sheet of paper folded twice. At the top was the date, October 14th, 2006. Then came those words: "Dear Dad, please don't leave because of what I told them." I couldn't breathe properly for a few seconds. My father had left our house that same week. I had spent 20 years believing that was the day he decided he didn't want to be a father anymore. I sat on my grandmother's kitchen floor and read the letter again. There were only 6 sentences. "Dear Dad, please don't leave because of what I told them. I didn't mean for everybody to get angry. I only told Mom because I was scared. I heard Uncle David say something in the garage. Please come back. I promise I won't tell anybody else. I love you, Emma." I stared at the name at the bottom. Emma. Me. I knew Uncle David, of course. He was my mother's older brother. He had always been part of family gatherings, birthdays, Christmas dinners, everything. But in my memories, he was just Uncle David, the funny one, the loud one. The man who always told embarrassing stories about my childhood. I read the sentence again. I heard Uncle David say something in the garage. What had I heard? Why was I scared? Why had my father left? And most importantly, why had this letter been hidden from me for 20 years? I searched the envelope for another page. Nothing. I turned it upside down. Nothing. The letter ended too abruptly, as if the rest had been removed. I immediately called my mother. She answered after the 4th ring. "Emma? Mom, I found something at Grandma's." There was a pause. "What did you find?" I looked at the letter. A letter. Another pause. "From who?" I swallowed. "From me." She didn't say anything. I could hear her breathing. Then she asked, very quietly, "Where did you find it?" That was the moment I knew. She knew exactly what I was talking about. Inside Grandma's sewing box. Silence. "Mom?" Finally she said, "You shouldn't have opened that." My stomach dropped. "You knew it was there." "I knew your grandmother had things from your childhood." "That isn't what I asked." "Emma, please." "No, you told me Dad left because he didn't want us. You told me he walked away from the family. You told me he never even tried to come back. I told you what I thought you needed to hear." I stood up. "What does that mean?" She sighed. "It means you were 8 years old. I'm 28 now." "I know." "Then tell me the truth. I can't do this over the phone." "Why?" "Because some things are easier to explain when you're sitting across from someone." I looked at the letter again. "What happened on October 14th? My mother didn't answer. That silence was an answer by itself. I drove home and sat in my car for almost 20 minutes before going inside. My husband, Daniel, was making dinner. He knew something was wrong the moment he saw my face. "What happened?" I handed him the letter. He read it without speaking. Then he looked at me. "Did you remember any of this?" "No. Nothing?" "Nothing." He pointed to the line about my uncle. "Do you remember Uncle David?" "Of course. Did he ever talk about that night?" "No. I had suddenly become aware of how much of my childhood I couldn't remember. Not everything, just that year. I remembered school. I remembered my grandmother's kitchen. I remembered a red bicycle. I remembered my father teaching me how to tie my shoes even though I was probably old enough to know already. But the week he left was like a wall in my memory. I could see things before it. I could see things after it. But that specific week was almost completely blank. That night I couldn't sleep. At 2:13 in the morning, I got out of bed and opened an old storage box my mother had given me years earlier. Inside were photographs, report cards, birthday cards, and childhood drawings. I went through everything until I found a photograph from October 2006. I was standing in front of my grandmother's house with my father. I was smiling. He was kneeling beside me with one hand on my shoulder. I had never seen the picture before. I turned it over. There was writing on the back. Last Sunday before everything changed. I felt cold. The next morning, I called my Uncle David. He answered cheerfully. "Emma, how are you? I found something at Grandma's." His voice changed slightly. "What?" "An old letter." "What kind of letter?" "A letter I wrote when I was 8. Silence. Then he said, "You should probably talk to your mother." "Why?" "Because she knows more about that time than I do." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You were there." "Of course I was there. I mentioned you in the letter." The line went completely silent. "Uncle David? What did it say?" I told him. He didn't respond for several seconds. Then he said, "Emma, you were a child. That doesn't answer my question." "I know. Did Dad leave because of something you did?" His voice became tired. "No." "Then what happened?" "I think your mother should tell you. Everybody keeps saying that, because it's true." I hung up. 2 hours later, my mother arrived at my house. She looked older than she had the week before. She sat at my kitchen table, and I placed the letter between us. "Tell me." She stared at it. "I never wanted you to find that." "Why?" "Because I wanted you to have a normal childhood." "I didn't have a normal childhood. My father disappeared." "He didn't disappear." I looked at her. "What?" "He left." "You just said he didn't disappear." "He left the house." "That's different." "For 20 years?" She looked down. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." She was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, "Your father didn't leave because he stopped loving you." I felt my chest tighten. "Then why did he leave?" My mother closed her eyes. "Because of your uncle." I sat back. "What did David do?" "He was taking money from the company." "What company?" "The family business." I knew my grandfather had owned a small construction company. I knew my father had worked there. I knew Uncle David had eventually taken over, but I had never known there had been a serious problem. How much? It wasn't about the money. Then what was it about? My mother looked at the letter. "You heard them talking." "Who?" "Your father and David." "About what?" She shook her head. "I can't, Mom. I promised your father." The room became silent. "You promised him what?" "That I wouldn't tell you until you were old enough to understand." "I am old enough." "I know." "Then tell me." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Your father found out that David had been stealing from the company for years. He confronted him. David threatened him. Your father wanted to go to the police. And you overheard them." I remembered nothing. "You were in the garage." I closed my eyes. For 1 second I saw something. A red toolbox. A voice. Someone saying, "You don't know what you're talking about." Then it vanished. My mother continued. "You came inside crying. You told me you heard Uncle David threatening Dad. I panicked. Your father wanted to report everything. David knew you had heard him. What happened next?" "Your father decided to leave." "Why?" "To protect you." I shook my head. "That doesn't make sense." "He thought if he stayed, David would keep coming after him. And if the police got involved, you might be dragged into everything. So he just left me." "He didn't just leave you." "That's what it felt like." My mother began crying. "He wanted to take you with him." I stared at her. "What?" "He wanted to take you." "Then why didn't he?" "Because your father believed David would follow you. He thought if you stayed with me and David believed your father had given up, you would be safer." I stood up and walked toward the window. "So you let me believe he abandoned me?" "Yes, for 20 years. "Yes. Why?" "Because every time you asked about him, I remembered your face that night. You were terrified. You kept asking whether Uncle David was going to hurt Dad. I couldn't tell you the truth without bringing that fear back." I turned around. "You didn't protect me, Mom." She looked at me. "You protected the 8-year-old version of me. And what about the 28-year-old version?" She didn't answer. That evening she left. I thought I had finally learned everything. I hadn't. 3 days later I returned to my grandmother's house. I went back to the sewing box because something about the missing page bothered me. I opened every compartment. Nothing. Then I noticed the bottom of the box sounded different when I tapped it. I removed the fabric lining. Underneath was another envelope. This one was in my grandmother's handwriting. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Inside was a note. Emma, if you found the first letter, then it is time you know what happened after your father left. I kept reading. Your father did not disappear. He stayed in town for 3 weeks. He rented a room under another name. He called every night. I stopped. My father had called. The note continued. Your mother answered the first few times. Then David found out where he was staying. I felt my heartbeat rise. He threatened your father again. Your father left town because he believed staying would put Emma in danger. Then came a sentence that broke something inside me. He never stopped writing to her. I searched the box. There was another envelope, then another, then another, 20 envelopes, one for every birthday. My hands were trembling so badly that I almost dropped them. The first was dated October 2007, the second October 2008, then 2009, every year, 20 letters. My mother had told me my father didn't contact us. He had been writing every single year. I opened the first one. Emma, you are 9 today. I don't know if your mother will ever give you these letters. I hope she does someday. I want you to know that leaving was the hardest thing I have ever done. I couldn't continue. I opened another. Emma, you're 12 now. I hope you still like drawing. You used to draw houses with blue roofs. I always wondered if you would become an artist. Another. Emma, you're 16. I know you probably hate me. I understand. But please don't ever believe that leaving meant I stopped loving you. I started crying. Then I opened the letter for my 18th birthday. Emma, you're finally an adult. If you're reading this, your mother has decided you're ready. If you're not reading it, then I hope she has a good reason. I don't want you to spend your life angry at her. I stopped. Something wasn't right. Why would he write that? I opened the last envelope. It was dated 3 months earlier, my 28th birthday. The letter began, Emma, if you are reading this, then your grandmother is gone, and your mother has finally decided to let you choose. I sat on the floor. I have wanted to call you for 20 years. Every birthday I came close. Every time, I stopped because I was afraid my presence would bring the past back into your life. Then came the sentence I had been waiting 20 years to hear. I never left because I didn't love you. I left because I loved you enough to let you hate me if it meant you would be safe. I pressed the letter against my chest. Then I read the final paragraph. I am not asking you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve that. I'm only asking you to know that I am still here. If you want to meet me, come to the old train station on Sunday at 4. I looked at the date. It was Saturday. I barely slept that night. The next afternoon, I drove to the old train station. It was almost empty. A few people sat on benches. A train passed in the distance. I stood there for 10 minutes. Then I saw him. He was older than the man in my memories. His hair was gray. His shoulders were thinner, but I knew him immediately. My father. He stopped when he saw me. Neither of us moved. Then he said the only thing that came naturally. Emma. I started crying. So you really stayed? He nodded. I never stopped. You wrote every year. Yes. Why didn't you come back? His eyes filled with tears. Because I thought staying away was the only way to keep you safe. I shook my head. You let me think you didn't love me. I know. You let me hate you. I know. You missed everything. His voice broke. I know. I wanted to be angry. I had rehearsed anger for 20 years. But standing there, looking at the man who had aged without me, I couldn't find the strength to hate him. Instead, I asked, why didn't you tell me? He looked down. Because your mother was right about one thing. You were 8. You shouldn't have had to carry what adults had done. I wiped my face. But you should have come back when I was older. Yes, he didn't defend himself. That somehow hurt more. I should have, he said. I was afraid. For 20 years. For 20 years. We stood in silence. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It was the same photograph I had found at my grandmother's house, except this one wasn't torn. Everyone was in it. My father, my mother, me, and Uncle David. My father handed it to me. Your grandmother kept the original. I looked at the picture. Why was David cut out of the one I found? Your mother couldn't stand looking at him after everything happened. I looked at my father. Did he ever go to prison? No. What happened to him? He left the country after the investigation began. And you? I started over. He paused. But I never really started over. I looked at him. What do you mean? He smiled sadly. Every year I bought you a birthday present. I laughed through my tears. What? I never knew what you liked anymore, so I kept buying things I thought an 8-year-old girl would like. I smiled for the first time. What did you buy? He laughed. Books, drawing pencils. One year I bought a bicycle. I shook my head. I hate bicycles. You loved them when you were 8. I guess I changed. So did I. For the first time in 20 years, I sat beside my father. We didn't solve everything that afternoon. We didn't magically become a family again. There were too many birthdays missing, too many school events, Too many ordinary mornings that could never be returned. But we talked, for 3 hours. He told me about the years I had missed. I told him about mine. I told him about college, my first job, my wedding, the apartment I had lived in, the books I loved, the things I was afraid of. He listened to everything, and when we finally stood up to leave, he asked, "Can I see you again?" I looked at him. Yes, then I hugged him. It wasn't the hug of a little girl finally getting her father back. It was the hug of a grown woman meeting a stranger who had once been the most important man in her world, and somehow, that made it more meaningful. A few weeks later, I sat with my mother. I put the original childhood letter on the table between us. She looked at it for a long time. "I thought hiding it would protect you," she said. "I know. I thought if you never remembered that night, you could have a normal life. I did have a life." She looked at me, but I took a breath, but I spent half of it believing I wasn't worth staying for. Tears filled her eyes. "I am sorry." I believed her. That didn't erase what happened. Forgiveness didn't mean pretending 20 years hadn't been lost. It meant deciding that the past would no longer be allowed to control every day that came after it. My mother reached for my hand. I let her. And for the first time, I understood something I wish I'd understood years earlier. Sometimes families hide the truth because they think children are too young to carry it. But children don't simply forget the things adults refuse to explain. They build their own explanations. And sometimes those explanations hurt far more than the truth ever could. For 20 years, I believed my father had left because I wasn't enough. The truth was almost the opposite. He left because he was terrified that staying would put me in danger. My mother hid the letter because she wanted to protect the little girl I had been. My father stayed away because he believed he was protecting that same little girl, and both of them made decisions for me without realizing that one day I would become an adult who deserved the truth. I still have that letter. The paper is yellow now. The ink is fading, but I keep it in a drawer beside the birthday letters my father wrote every year. Sometimes I read the first one, the one written by an 8-year-old girl who didn't understand why her father was leaving. And sometimes I read the last one, the one written by a father who never stopped hoping his daughter would someday understand. The 2 letters are 20 years apart, but they say almost the same thing. I love you. If there is one thing this experience taught me, it's that protecting someone and trusting someone are not always the same thing. You can love someone deeply and still make a decision that hurts them. You can hide the truth for the right reason and still leave a wound behind. And sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean saying, "What you did was okay." Sometimes it simply means saying, "I understand why you did it, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying the anger." If you were Emma, could you forgive a parent who kept the truth from you for 20 years because they believed they were protecting you? Or would those lost years be impossible to forgive? Tell me what you would do. And if this story made you feel something, share it with someone who might understand it. Subscribe for more stories about family, secrets, choices, and the moments that change people forever. Because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive when we're ready for it. Sometimes it arrives 20 years late, and all we can decide is what we do with it when it finally comes.